The champagne tower caught the light from 100 crystal chandeliers, sending fractured rainbows across the ballroom of Marble House. 300 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos moved through the celebration like schools of exotic fish, their laughter rising and falling with the string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. Elena Vasquez adjusted the cuffs of her white service uniform for the third time in 5 minutes. Remember the rules, Margaret, the head of household staff had told her that morning. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Don't exist. Your heir, Elena. Expensive, invisible heir. So far, Elena had done an excellent job of being heir. She'd circulated through the gold room for 2 hours, refilling champagne flutes and clearing empty plates, and not a single guest had acknowledged her presence. This suited her fine. Invisibility was a skill she'd spent 30 years perfecting. That's when she spotted him. Julian Ashworth stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the party like a king surveying a kingdom he no longer wanted. At 32, he had the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers: sharp jaw, gray eyes, dark hair swept back with careless precision. His tuxedo probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. He looked, by every measurable standard, like a man who had everything. But Elena noticed what others missed. The way his fingers kept drifting to his breast pocket, touching something hidden there. The way his eyes scanned the crowd with a restlessness that had nothing to do with the party. The way he stood apart, even while surrounded by people desperate for his attention. Lonely, she thought. He looks lonely. It was a strange thought to have about a billionaire. Marco, a young server, appeared at her elbow, panic written across his face. The champagne fountain is backing up. Mrs. Patterson is complaining about the foie gras, and Mr. Ashworth's mother wants the VIP section restocked immediately. Elena didn't look up from the tray she was arranging. Red lever on the left side of the fountain. Tell Mrs. Patterson the chef will prepare a specially seasoned portion just for her, and I'll handle the VIP section. How do you know about the... Go, Marco. He went. Elena gathered fresh glasses onto her tray and made her way toward the VIP area, keeping her head down, her movements efficient and unremarkable. She'd learned long ago that the key to surviving in service wasn't just being good at your job, it was being forgettable while you did it. She was passing the champagne tower when it happened. Reginald Worthington III, hedge fund manager, noted philanthropist, and thoroughly drunk, stumbled backward while gesturing about his new yacht. His elbow caught the edge of the crystal pyramid. Time seemed to slow. Elena saw the tower wobble, saw the cascade of glasses beginning to fall, saw Lady Catherine Peyton directly in the splash zone wearing vintage Chanel that probably belonged in a museum. She didn't think. 20 years of service instinct took over. She lunged forward, catching the falling tray with one hand while using her body to shield Lady Peyton from the worst of the champagne spray. Crystal tumbled, liquid splashed. Elena twisted to minimize the damage, and her wrist caught on the sharp edge of a serving bracket. The sound of fabric tearing was lost in the chaos. But in the aftermath, as guests exclaimed and staff rushed to help, Elena looked down at her left arm and felt her blood turn to ice. Her sleeve had torn from wrist to elbow. The medical tape she always wore had ripped away. And there, exposed under the merciless glitter of the chandeliers, was the scar she'd spent her entire adult life hiding, a perfect circle of raised tissue, red-white. Against her pale skin, ugly and unexplainable and completely, unmistakably visible. Elena's first instinct was to cover it, to hide, to disappear into the service corridors where no one would look at her too closely. But before she could move, stop. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That single word carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind of command that came from generations of men who had never been refused anything. Julian Ashworth stood 10 feet away, his face drained of all color. He wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at her wrist with an expression she couldn't begin to interpret. Shock, hope, terror, wonder, all colliding in those gray eyes like weather systems converging. Your arm, he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. Where did you get that scar? Elena's head began to pound, a familiar pain, the kind that always came without warning. It's nothing, sir. I apologize for the disturbance. I'll clean this up immediately. That's not nothing. Julian was moving toward her now, cutting through the crowd like a ship through still water. Guests parted before him, sensing something momentous, even if they didn't understand what. That scar. I know that scar. Sir, you're mistaken. But he was already in front of her. And before Elena could retreat, his hand closed around her wrist. Not rough, almost reverent, his fingers trembling as they traced the raised circle of tissue. Red rubber band, he whispered. I put it there. You were 5 years old. You fell and scraped your knee and you were crying and I didn't have a bandage, so I tied my rubber band around your wrist and told you it was magic. I told you the red would scare the pain away. The pounding in Elena's head intensified. Images flashed through the darkness. A boy's face, younger but with the same gray eyes. A garden, the smell of roses, a voice calling a name that wasn't hers. Evie, Evie, come back. My name is Elena, she heard herself say. The words felt foreign in her mouth. No. Julian's voice broke completely. Tears were streaming down his face now, and somewhere in the background, Elena heard gasps, murmurs, the click of phones capturing this impossible moment. No, your name is Evelyn. Evelyn Maria Santos. Your mother was Maria, she worked for my family. She made the best corn soup in the world, and she sang you to sleep in Spanish, and you had a gap in your front teeth right here. He touched his own mouth, his hand shaking. And you were my best friend, my only friend. And they told me you were dead. They told me you died in a fire 25 years ago. But I never believed it. I never stopped looking. The tray slipped from Elena's numb fingers. Crystal shattered against marble. The music died. 300 guests watched in stunned silence as the most eligible bachelor in American high society fell to his knees before a servant. I thought you were gone. Julian was sobbing now, years of grief pouring out of him like blood from a wound. Every day, every single day for 9,125 days, I've been looking for you. He reached into his breast pocket with trembling hands and withdrew a small, battered box. Elena watched distantly, as if this were happening to someone else, as he opened it to reveal a coil of red rubber, aged and brittle, preserved in plastic like a holy relic. I kept it, Julian said. The piece that fell off when they took you. I've carried it every day since. Please. His voice shattered. Please tell me you're real. Tell me I haven't finally gone mad. Elena's migraine had reached a crescendo. The room was spinning. Julian's face swam before her, and behind it she could almost see a garden, rose bushes with thorns, a boy holding her hand, then darkness, pain, a closed space, the smell of smoke. I don't remember, she whispered. I don't remember anything before I was 7. Something shifted in Julian's expression, grief and hope tangled together. That's when they took you. That's when you disappeared. He looked at the box in his hands, then, with a movement that made the entire room gasp, he held it out to her. Marry me. The words fell like stones into still water. I know how this sounds, Julian continued, his voice raw. I know you don't know me. But I know you. I've known you my whole life. I've loved you since before I understood what love meant, and I've been waiting. His voice cracked again. So long. Just stay. Let me prove to you who you are. Elena looked at this man, this stranger who knew her better than she knew herself, this billionaire on his knees before a servant, this broken soul who had carried a piece of red rubber for 25 years. She opened her mouth to answer, and the darkness took her. Elena dreamed of fire. Not the gentle kind, not candles or fireplaces, but hungry fire, consuming fire. And somewhere in the flames, a child was screaming. She woke gasping, hands clawing at unfamiliar sheets, her heart pounding against her ribs. The room was wrong. Her apartment was a cramped studio with water stains on the ceiling. This room was vast and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. And there, in a chair by the window, sat Julian Ashworth. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his tuxedo had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans, but his gaze when it met hers was sharp and present. You fainted, he said quietly. The doctor says it was shock. You've been out for almost 12 hours. Elena sat up too fast. The room tilted. Where am I? My private residence. Not the main estate. Julian rose, but kept his distance, giving her space. You're free to leave whenever you want. I can have a car take you anywhere. But, he paused. But I'm asking you for 7 days. He moved to a desk and returned with a thick folder, setting it on the bed between them. 7 days to show you what I've found. Who you really are. And if you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you. I won't contact you again. Elena stared at the folder. It was stuffed with papers, photographs, official documents, the weight of 25 years of searching, compressed into manila and ink. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. The honesty surprised her. You have every reason to think this is manipulation. But consider this. I proposed to you in front of 300 witnesses. I turned myself into tomorrow's scandal. If this were a scheme, it would be a spectacularly stupid one. Despite everything, Elena felt her mouth twitch. That's actually a fair point. Julian's expression softened. Also, I brought you this. He crossed to a small table and returned with a bowl of something steaming and golden. The smell hit Elena before she saw what it was, and something in her chest clenched. Corn soup, Julian said. Maria's recipe. My cook learned it from her years ago. Elena stared at the bowl, thick and golden, dotted with kernels, flecked with herbs. She didn't remember ever seeing it before. And yet her hand moved without permission. She lifted the spoon, brought it to her lips. The first taste exploded. Sweet and savory, butter and cream. And with it came a flash so vivid it stole her breath. A kitchen, sunlight through yellow curtains, a woman with dark hair humming, the clink of a wooden spoon, the feeling of being small and safe and loved. What do you remember? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. Nothing. But Elena's hands were shaking. I remember nothing. It's just a feeling. Like standing outside a house where I used to live. Over the next 3 days, Julian showed Elena the evidence. Police reports from the kidnapping, private investigator files spanning 2 decades, hospital records from when a 7-year-old Jane Doe was found wandering near an abandoned warehouse in Newark with no memory and a wound on her wrist that doctors couldn't explain. You were in the system for years, Julian said, spreading photographs across the table. I looked at this file dozens of times, but you were listed as approximately 7 or 8 years old, and I was searching for a 5-year-old. You were in New Jersey, and I was looking along the Canadian border. We kept missing each other. Elena picked up one of the photographs. A little girl stared back at her, bruised, terrified, alone. She didn't recognize the face. But something about the eyes. If that champagne tower hadn't fallen, Julian continued quietly, if your sleeve hadn't torn, I might have walked right past you forever. You've worked events my family hosted. We could have been in the same room 100 times. You wouldn't have noticed me, Elena said. I'm paid not to be noticed. I know. Julian's jaw tightened. I've been surrounded by invisible people my whole life. I never questioned why, or who made them that way. On the 4th day, Julian took her to a cemetery in Queens. The headstone was modest. Maria Elena Santos. Beloved mother. Her heart was too big for this world. She died 3 years after you disappeared, Julian said. Heart failure, officially. But everyone who knew her said she died of grief. Elena stared at the name. Maria Elena. Her name. You were named after her middle name, Julian said softly. Something cracked open in Elena's chest. She sank to her knees in the grass, and for the first time since waking in Julian's house, she wept. The memories came with the tears, not complete, just fragments. A voice singing in Spanish. The smell of lavender soap. Arms wrapped around her, rocking her to sleep. Mama, she whispered. The word felt like coming home. On the 5th day, they worked in the garden. Julian had mentioned that Maria used to tend roses on the estate, overgrown now, wild and tangled from years of neglect. Elena had asked if they could try to restore them, so here they were, side by side in the dirt. Julian had abandoned his expensive clothes for old jeans and a faded shirt. His hands were covered in mud. He looked nothing like a billionaire and everything like a man trying to remember how to be human. They didn't talk much. The work filled the silence. It was late afternoon when Julian hissed in pain. A thorn had pierced his glove, leaving a small cut on his palm. Without thinking, Elena reached for his hand. She lifted it to her mouth, blew gently on the wound, and heard herself say, Sana sana, colita de rana, si no sanas hoy, sanaras mañana. The words were out before she knew what they meant, a Spanish nursery rhyme, a healing charm for children. Julian was staring at her with tears on his face. That's what you used to say, he whispered. Every time I got hurt. Your mother taught it to you. Elena looked at his hand in hers, at the roses growing around them, at the man who had spent 25 years searching for a ghost. I believe you, she said softly. I believe I'm Evelyn. Julian's breath caught. Elena, but I need to know everything. Not just what happened, why it happened. Why would anyone kidnap a servant's child? Julian's expression changed. Something dark and old moved behind his eyes. They didn't want you, he said. They wanted me. I was the heir to the Ashworth fortune. But when they came to take me, you were there. You refused to leave my side. He paused, swallowed. They kept you anyway, as leverage. And then my father paid the ransom for me. Julian's voice went flat. He refused to pay for you. He said you weren't an Ashworth. You weren't worth the risk. The words hung in the air between them. He reported you dead, Julian continued. Closed the case. Sent me to boarding school so I'd stop asking questions. And me, you fell through the cracks. For 25 years. His hands clenched. My family's cowardice is why you don't remember your own name. Elena was quiet for a long moment. You were 7 years old, Julian. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? His laugh was bitter. The blood that made those decisions runs through my veins. The fortune that wasn't worth spending to save you is the same fortune I inherited. And you've spent 25 years trying to undo what they did. Elena reached out, took his dirt-covered hand in hers. That counts for something, doesn't it? It's the only thing that counts. On the 6th day, Julian's mother came. Eleanor Ashworth arrived without warning, silver Mercedes sweeping up the drive like an invading army. Elena watched from an upstairs window as the matriarch emerged, designer silk, cold fury, flanked by lawyers. 20 minutes later, Julian came to find her. She's offered you $10 million to disappear, he said flatly. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. And you're telling me because you should know what you're dealing with. My mother sees you as a threat to the family image. The tabloids are already running stories about the gold digger Maid. What do you want me to do? Whatever you want. Julian's gaze was steady. I'll support whatever choice you make. But if you're willing, I'd like you to meet her. Eleanor Ashworth looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had spent her entire life at the top of a social hierarchy she believed she'd earned rather than inherited. She sat in Julian's parlor like a queen holding court, her gaze sweeping over Elena with undisguised contempt. So this is her. Eleanor's voice could have frozen champagne. The maid. I must say, you clean up better than expected. Mother. Julian's voice was steel. Elena is my guest. Guest. How modern. Eleanor rose, circling Elena like a shark. Let me be clear, Miss Vasquez. I don't know if you're a clever opportunist or a tragic coincidence, and I don't care. What I care about is my family's legacy. She leaned closer. $10 million. Any account you name. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away. Think about it. That's more money than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes of carrying champagne. Elena felt her heart pounding. Part of her, the part that remembered cold apartments and empty bank accounts, wanted to take the money and run. But another part was remembering Julian on his knees, the rubber band preserved in plastic, 25 years of searching. Mrs. Ashworth, Elena said, I grew up in foster care. I've been hungry. I've been homeless. I know what money means when you don't have it. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with triumph. But I also know what it feels like to be invisible, Elena continued. To be treated as less than human because of where you come from. Your son is the first person who's ever really seen me, and you're asking me to put a price on that. She straightened her spine. I don't want your money. I want to know who I am, and I'm not going to let you buy me out of my own identity. The room went silent. Eleanor's face cycled through shock, fury, and something that might have been grudging respect. You'll regret this, she said finally. I'll make sure of it. Then I'll deal with it. Elena didn't flinch. I've survived worse than you. Eleanor swept out. Julian watched her go, then turned to Elena with something like awe. That, he said slowly, was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Your mother is terrifying. She is. And you just stared her down like she was nothing. He shook his head. Evelyn used to do that too. Stand up to kids twice her size when they bullied me. I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, Julian said. Different words. The 7th day brought truth. Julian had organized a formal dinner, not to celebrate, but to confront. His family, the board of directors, everyone who had benefited from the lie told 25 years ago. Elena sat at his right hand wearing a simple burgundy dress Julian had given her. Maria's color, he'd explained. She'd accepted it. The meal progressed in tense silence until Eleanor, 3 glasses of wine past discretion, decided to attack. "I've done research," she announced to the table, into Miss Vasquez's background. "There are inconsistencies, questions about her immigration status, her right to work." Her smile was a knife. It would be such a shame if those questions reached the wrong authorities. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Her legal status had always been precarious, the paperwork from her childhood incomplete, her citizenship uncertain. "Mother." Julian's voice was ice. "That's enough. Is it? I'm simply pointing out that this fantasy has consequences." Eleanor's gaze locked on Elena. Sometimes the smart move is knowing when to quit. The table had gone silent. Every eye was on Elena, waiting for her to crumble. Instead, she stood. "Mrs. Ashworth," Elena said, and her voice carried across the room, "You're absolutely right that I don't have proper documentation. I was a Jane Doe who fell through your family's cracks. I have no birth certificate, no records before age 7, no proof that I exist at all." She pulled up her sleeve, exposing the scar. "Except for this. This scar is the only documentation of my identity, and it proves that 25 years ago, your family decided that a 5-year-old girl's life wasn't worth protecting." Murmurs rippled through the guests. "You could destroy me," Elena continued. "You have the money, the connections, the power. But you can't erase what happened. You can't unmake the choice your husband made. And you can't stop your son from knowing the truth about who his family really is." She looked at Julian, who was staring at her with something like reverence. "Julian spent 25 years searching for me because he couldn't live with what was done in his family's name. He gave up everything, his position, his reputation, his inheritance, to try to make it right." She turned back to Eleanor. "What have you given up, Mrs. Ashworth? What have you ever sacrificed for anyone but yourself?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then Julian stood, walked to Elena's side, and took her hand. "This dinner is over," he said. "Anyone who can't accept Elena can leave. And anyone who threatens her again will discover exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect her." He looked at his mother. "That includes you." 3 months later, Julian called a press conference. Elena watched from the back of the room as he stood before cameras and reporters, his face calm despite what she knew was churning beneath. 25 years ago, he began, a little girl named Evelyn Maria Santos was kidnapped alongside me. When the ransom demand came, my father paid for my release. He refused to pay for hers. The room erupted. Julian waited. Evelyn was declared dead. Her mother died of grief. The case was closed. He paused. But Evelyn wasn't dead. She survived. And because of my father's decision, she spent 23 years lost and alone. Another pause. I found her recently, alive, here in New York. Julian's voice strengthened. Today I'm announcing that I'm stepping down as CEO of Ashworth Industries. I'm transferring my shares to a foundation dedicated to finding missing children. The foundation will be named after Maria Santos, Evelyn's mother and the closest thing I ever had to real family. He looked directly into the cameras. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm simply doing what should have been done decades ago. 1 year later, the cabin by the lake had been Elena's idea. I've lived in cities my whole life, she'd told Julian. I want to wake up to trees and water and quiet. He'd found it within a week. Not bought, rented. They'd agreed to build their new life with their own hands. Julian taught woodworking at a community college now. Elena worked at a nursery, surrounded by flowers that reminded her of Maria. They weren't rich anymore. They drove a used truck, cooked their own meals, and spent their evenings on the porch watching the sunset. It was, by any measure, a smaller life. It was also the happiest either of them had ever been. On this particular evening, the anniversary of the night everything changed, they sat at the table Julian had built, eating soup Elena had made from Maria's recipe. I have something for you, Elena said. She pulled up the sleeve of her left arm. The scar was still there, but now, surrounding it like a frame, was a tattoo, a vine of green leaves and tiny flowers, transforming the ugly mark into something beautiful. I got it done last week, she explained. The artist said she'd never seen anything like it. She said it was like watching someone turn a wound into a garden. Julian reached out, tracing the vine gently. It's incredible, he breathed. The scar used to be the worst thing about me, Elena said. The thing I hid, but you made me see it differently. It's not just what I lost, it's proof of what I survived. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a red rubber band, new, bright, unmarked by time. We can't change the past, she said, wrapping it gently around his wrist. But we can start fresh, right here, right now. Julian looked at the rubber band, at the woman who had been lost and found, at the garden she'd helped him grow from the ruins of his guilt. I spent 25 years looking for you, he said softly. Not to bring you back to a golden cage. Just to build something real together. Elena smiled. Then let's build it. Outside, the stars came out over the lake. And in the cabin, two people who had been lost for a very long time were finally, peacefully home. Some scars tell the story of what we lost. Others remind us of what we survived and who found us when we were lost.